on, everyone? Jason Numbers here, and welcome back to another episode of the Political Freedom Fighters podcast. Now, in this episode, I have been waiting to do this episode for months, but now I'm able to finally do it. Ladies and gentlemen, I have here with you guys, with you all here today, a couple of guests representing the North Carolina Green Party. And with that, I would like to welcome you all, Wayne Turner and Michael Dublin. How are you, gentlemen?
Happy to be here.
Doing great, James. Thank you for the invitation.
You're absolutely welcome. Now, the first question I gotta ask is, who are you guys and what do you do?
Well, I guess I'll start off. My name is, as you said, Wayne Turner. I've been involved with the Green Party in North Carolina since 2000 in various roles. And here we are in 2025, and we're on the ballot and once again able to run candidates. It's only the second time in the history, third time in the history of the party that we've been able to get ballot access. And so it's an opportunity that we look forward to taking advantage of.
And I'm Michael Dublin. I'm an educator, middle school teacher, and a member of the Green Party. I'm also the co-chair of the Black Caucus of the North Carolina Green Party and a candidate for office for Congressional District 13. I did run last cycle in 2024 for Congressional District 2.
Wow, that's awesome. Michael, I really wish you the best of luck. I really got to get you back on in another episode so that I can do an individual interview with you on your run for office.
Sounds great, James.
All right, next up, let's talk a bit about the history of the North Carolina Green Party.
Well, it was formulated probably in the year 2000 by a group of people that were mostly based in Charlotte in the mountains. At the time, I think there was only two people from the Triangle involved, and I think there were 5 or 6 in Charlotte, and they had the advantage of the fact that there had been a county Green Party formed in Buncombe County before that in the 90s. The Green Party that formed in Buncombe County began to publish a newspaper, which has now become a standard commercial paper in North Carolina. It's called the Mountain. The name escapes me at the moment. I want to say Mountain Times, but that's probably not correct. The Green Party, moved from that to begin to try to get ballot access in North Carolina, and quickly discovered that we had some of the most restrictive ballot access laws in the nation. We eventually managed to get those laws altered somewhat, but not enough to allow us to get ballot access. And there's a provision in the law that increases the number of signatures you have to get as the voting population of the state rises. So, as you know, with percentage increases, they quickly add up. We've been able to get those numbers reduced, and in 2017, we did manage to get on the ballot through a protracted signature campaign, and in the next general election, we're kicked off because we didn't get enough votes. And then in 2022, we, behind the strength of Matthew Host's Senate campaign, we did it again. And Still did not get enough votes in 2024, but there's a provision in the law that allowed us to reapply based on the number of states that the Green Party was owned nationwide. And that allowed us to retain our ballot access for this cycle. In between is a long story of attending events, petitioning, talking to people, trying to convince people that if we didn't start to pay attention to our environment, many of our social ills were not going to matter much. But the Green Party nationally and we in the state recognized that the truth is people don't care about the environment if there's so many social ills that they can't cope with them. Their primary concern is survival. They have to have a job, they have to get food, housing, transportation, all of these things, which even, 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, were beginning to be a challenge for people to get, especially following the great financial crisis of 2007, 2008. And that hasn't really changed since then. If anything, we're in a worse position now than we were then in many ways, because the economy never recovered from the great financial crisis. So people are still struggling with these social issues, and we've been out there addressing them alongside the environment. But we still emphasize that, without an environment, none of this matters. If we destroy the planet, we can argue all day about taxes and income, but it won't make any difference. There will be nothing left to argue about. So we continue to take that message out in our races. We've done it in statewide races. We've done it in local races. And in 2026, we're going to do it again.
All right, that is actually really good to hear. So the next question I want to ask both of you is, why did you join the Green Party?
Michael, do you want to respond?
I will. James, I like so many people of North Carolina became disillusioned with the political system, and growing up in North Carolina, as most African Americans in North Carolina, I was in the Democratic Party, and my grandparents, my grandmama had us involved at an early age with the NAACP. My parents as well had us involved. But as time went on, I became more aware and got very disillusioned with the Democratic Party. And I could say both of them, but since, my history and my experience is mostly with the Democratic Party, I speak through that lens. And, the frustration of being taken for granted, for them not speaking to us in the working class, and not helping us, and just really starting to understand that, they would do a lot of talking, but not a lot of action, and not a lot of, and this kind of left, the working class behind. So I became unaffiliated for a long time, especially during the more like the President Obama years, when I really just gave up and found myself in a desert as far as not having a political home. Then there were some movements that kind of perked my interest, to get me re-engaged, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement and the things that was going on during that time period. And as a teacher, I always encouraged my students to get involved, and I wanted to re-engage and get involved. And actually, I've been encouraging my students to run for office and to make a change. And I said, well, I got to practice what I preach and get back involved. And I did not plan on going back, and I was not going back to the Democratic Party. Once I researched and found out more about the Green Party, which obviously I heard of before, but I was like so many people, I was not as educated about the Green Party as some of the other parties. I just found out that that's where I align, and I always align with them because even from childhood, I thought that people should have health insurance, and actually was shocked when I found out, probably as a teenager, that everybody didn't have health care. So and at that point, I didn't really understand why. I didn't understand corporate greed at that point in my life. And I just couldn't fathom why profits are more important in these companies than taking care of people. When you put that in context with what I was being taught religiously in church about how important it is to take care of people, and so it just didn't line up. And so I always thought that, people deserve health care. I think it's a human right. So that's not something I recently stumbled upon. It's something I've always believed in. And I've always believed in protecting the environment. I just can't understand why people would damage the environment. And, even going back to the early 1980s with the PCPs being dumped into the marginalized neighborhoods. And I was, a younger person then, but I was still involved with, protesting that kind of action. So I started to understand how some of these companies were doing that, and to the marginalized people, and just kind of taking them for granted and dumping things in their backyard. And then I was, also when the Exxon Valdez spilled, and I was involved with marches and protesting against that, and standing for ecological justice, and finding out more about what was happening to our planet. And I've always said, well, hey, we're the ones that had to take action to save it. And so when I looked at the Green Party's, 4 pillars, I'm like, okay, I'll align with all of these. And so that's why I decided to join the Green Party.
That's awesome, Michael. Wayne?
Well, I joined the Green Party in the wake of the Bush-Gore election of 2000. And I watched the Supreme Court and basically install George Bush into office unfairly, and they did it by simply stopping the vote count in Florida. I would have thought the Democrats would have fought this harder, but I began to see that they didn't seem to view the fight as important compared to being seen somehow to be people that could reach a compromise, which is supposedly the core of our political system, or a core premise of our political system. And then I saw the Democrats turn around and blame Ralph Nader for this. Well, I thought that's nonsense. They stopped the vote. Who knows who won? Well, as it turned out, Gore did win. But they had stopped the vote. I wasn't particularly politically active before that time. And in fact, I was very politically naive. I had a very Pollyannish view, I would say, of American politics. So I joined the Greens to try to help them get on the ballot, because to me it was simply an issue of fairness. Why should not these people be allowed to be on the ballot? Why shouldn't anyone be allowed to be on the ballot except members of these two parties? And that was the beginning of a long and intense political education, culminating in where we are today, when there is no circumstance under which I would vote for a Democrat, much less a Republican. I see now, 25 years later, not just the flaws, but the fundamental denial of democracy that is built into our electoral system. the lack of choice, the lack of inability to go out and vote for whom you want to, the essential clamps that are made on freedom of association. It's all still 25 years later strikes me as unfair. That's possibly a naive way to describe it, but I do believe I do have some sense of justice, and I do not see that the system serves either justice nor the people of the United States. It simply does not. It's corrupt. It's open to manipulation by money even more now than it was in 2000, and nothing's changing. And when you look at the system as a whole, this is what you still see: these two parties that essentially dominate election law in all the states. It is a flaw of the Constitution, in my opinion, that the federal government has no say over election law except to it specifies the time and date of the presidential and vice presidential elections, senatorial elections, House elections, but it says nothing whatsoever about how these elections are conducted or who participates. That leaves election law to the states. And so in the U.S., we have 50 states and 50 different sets of election law, some of which are amenable to participation by independent politicians and minor parties, and some of which are not. My understanding of the system is much more sophisticated than it was 25 years ago, but it still all boils down to the idea that our electoral system is deliberately designed to exclude everyone except members of these two major parties. Still very difficult to break into, and if electoral politics is to ever have any success, that has to change.
Yeah, I agree. So anyways, next up we're gonna go over your state party's platform. But before I do that, when I reviewed like your party's platform, it was like very long. I would say the longest out of any of the state parties here in North Carolina. Why is that?
Well, it's probably because we cover so much territory and we try to communicate what our intentions are to the public. I believe the Democrat and Republican platforms are not very long, and there's a reason for that. They don't want to get trapped into something. They want the flexibility to abandon their platform when they feel able to do so. And Greens have taken the time to look at the situation around us, recognizing that the conditions change as history changes, as time changes, and try to craft a platform that addresses all of the issues that we see needing to be addressed.
All right.
Can I expound?
Yeah, go ahead.
Expound on that point. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so for example, I think we have solutions and ideas. Okay, so we would say we support single-payer universal health care, free at the point of service. So we get detailed, specific information, whereas someone like the Democrats may say, well, we support healthcare or access to healthcare. And so that sounds good, but then if you dig into it and say, well, what do you mean by it? What does that actually, it leaves them so much wiggle room that they can't really, answer that question, So it's like, James, I can say you have access to a Lamborghini, and you do, but can you afford it? So, I think that's why, our platform is like Wayne says, we cover a lot, and we put the details in there because we have green solutions for these issues that that everyone is facing, and it is, so that's part of the reason too.
All right, that's pretty good to hear. So we're gonna go over the most interesting parts of your state party's platform, and I'll try to cover like at least 9 and maybe more if we got time, which I'm sure we will. But yeah, the first stance I want to go over is citizen participation. Citizen participation should be sought at all levels of government. No citizen should be denied information regarding decisions made by government officials.
Okay, well, that's fairly transparent. We live in a time now when our governments, from the local level to the federal level, hide much of what they're doing. Part of this is simply, I think, bureaucratic inefficiency or barriers, what people call red tape. But a lot of it is the general public doesn't have access to much of the information that's available except through uh, torturous methods like Freedom of Information Act requests and so forth and so on. Um, you can go to the government websites and find some information, but much of our population, there's significant portions of our population that don't have access to the internet and don't know how to do this. Um, Governments should routinely try to educate their citizenry about what they're doing. Some municipalities and counties do a reasonably good job of this. Others simply do not. Um, our budgets should be free and accessible and easily understood. They're not. They're difficult. They're long, and a lot of the details are hard to come by. So much so that we have entire institutions, non-governmental organizations or NGOs that are dedicated to figuring out what the government is saying and trying to communicate that information to people. They're doing a job the government should be doing on its own. The situation of state secrecy is only getting worse and worse. And by state, I mean not just states, but the United States as a nation. That attitude has trickled down to the states now, especially in the red states. It's not so easy to find out what your governments are doing or why decisions are made. And of course, as we know, many of the decisions that are made are influenced by lobbyists and outside groups that have no real presence in the state. They're simply there to be sure that public policy in general is directed or channeled into the lanes and avenues that they wish it to be in. We don't know much of what goes on in our legislature in North Carolina. They talk about transparency, but really it's run behind closed doors, and the decisions that, and then bills pop up and we don't know how they were created or crafted. They don't get there's no real representation of half of the public, and certainly half the public are involved. The city of Raleigh, for example, used to have neighborhood organizations that they called CECs, community engagement groups that had an active say in how the government was run. The city had to consult with them. There were, I believe there were 19 of them. And the city had to, they kept up with what the city was doing. And if something affected their neighborhood group, they would show up and argue against it. Rather than continue this contentious process, the city elected an administration that simply decided one day out of the blue to do away with them. There would be no more CCs. And so now, individual citizens have to look at what the government is doing without the support of other individual citizens in their group. It's if you don't form an organization that will go and chase these issues, then quite likely they'll be voted on and implemented without you having any knowledge of it until it's done. And this is the direction our society in general is going. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, I agree, and I really do not trust the North Carolina state government after the whole changes in the petitioning process, and I've talked about this like a lot in my show. It really sucks. But anyways, next up is neighborhood associations. We support public funding of neighborhood associations, which can inspire individual and collective community action. This makes the concept of grassroots politics a reality.
Well, those are the CECs that I just described. That Raleigh had a model for this, and they abandoned it.
All right. Next up is immigrant rights. Let me see if I can find it. All right, there we go. You guys have quite a bit when it comes to immigrants' rights. So we're gonna go one at a time when it comes to immigrant rights, and yeah, we'll see from there. The North Carolina Green Party stands firmly for social justice for all those living in the U.S. regardless of their immigration status. Immigrants and migrants strengthen our communities and should be celebrated. We support full amnesty and a safe pathway to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants, as well as full civil rights for all migrants. 1. End workplace and home raids. Millions of people live and work in the U.S. with no legal status, making them subject to extreme exploitation and abuse, including immigration raids that terrorize the immigrant community and break up families, as well as rampant employer abuses of undocumented workers. Immigrants should feel safe in their communities and workplaces. They should be able to live their lives free from institutionalized intimidation and violence, and should not be forced into hiding or subjected to constant fear and uncertainty while going to work, taking children to school, or simply being visible in their communities.
Michael, do you want to address that? I can. Michael, I'm not hearing you.
I think his mic's out. Go ahead, Will.
Well, bear in mind that language was probably written in the early 2000s. And if you think about everything that's in it, it is just as applicable today as it was 25 years ago. Nothing has changed. The immigrant community in North Carolina, whether it's from Latin America, Canada, not so much Canada, but to some extent, Somalia, Africa, any country that has problems with displaced populations, often due to wars, and often wars that the United States was involved in, has had people come over here trying to escape persecution, and they have been a convenient scapegoat for politicians for as long as that issue has existed. I mean, you go back to the 1950s in this country and Operation Wetback. You can actually you can go back much further than that. It's historically been a feature of the United States that its population has scapegoated and objected to immigration from different areas, different incoming populations, starting with different nationalities of white Europeans in the 1800s, all the way up to the situation that we're in today, have traditionally been used by politicians as scapegoats, and our platform is intended to put a stop to that. We need to stop this idea that immigrants, simply by virtue of not being from here, are less than people. That they are no different from people that already live here, in that they have the same basic needs that we do, and if they're here fleeing economic or political persecution or economic failures or political persecution in our own country, the rational response is to look and see what causes that and change our own behavior in that regard, but we simply don't do it. So that platform, whether it's written, it could have been written in the 1960s, and the same thing would have applied. So we still stand by it. There's nothing in it that we would change. Or,
All right. Next up is Abolish ICE. The creation of ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, in 2003 and its placement under the Homeland Security umbrella helped advance the narrative that immigrants are a threat to the United States. The NC Green Party rejects this message and calls for ICE's abolishment and the implementation of a human rights approach to immigration. We oppose the provision of current law that allows local police to become agents of the immigration agency. Local policing functions should be completely separate from immigration enforcement.
Michael, are you able to talk? We're still not hearing you. You have a bad mic connection.
Must be.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, you hear me now?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I was speaking before. I'm sorry. I mean, do we really need to speak on that? I mean, what we're seeing now, and this is not some dystopian sci-fi movie that we're watching now. I have neighbors. My children have neighbors who are afraid to come out of their house. As a teacher, I've had children say that they're afraid to come to school and they come home and their parents might be gone. And talking to many people even before this current administration, talk about the challenges of them trying to go through the process and become naturalized citizens. And so we have people who for years have been trying and then met one roadblock after another. And especially depending on where they're coming from. Because I've also heard of other cases where people came from places in Europe and the process for them was not as difficult. It's about recognizing, as Wayne said, their people, and that those that come over here should not get abused or exploited. Because exploitation is wrong against anyone. So we in the Green Party are definitely against exploitation. So that definitely fits in well, with our platform. I mean, because we see what's happening, and as Wayne said, I mean, it goes way back, and so it's relevant then and it's relevant now, and so we continue to stand by. I mean, what is going on now? You see ICE agents tackling people in the streets and grabbing people leaving the store in front of their kids. You would think that would not happen here, but yes, it's happening right now. So it's not like we were fortune tellers, but understanding that this is something that's relevant then and is relevant now.
All right.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I think that one thing that's probably should be mentioned here more simply is that a lot of the current immigration issue is an expression of the inherent racism that is built into United States society. Our society has always been a racist society. Capitalism itself has created the conditions for this situation because by depicting various groups of people, Latin American people, Black people, people from Somalia, people from Haiti, et cetera, as racially undesirable. They don't say that, but that's what they mean. That they can disguise the fact that ultimately what we're seeing here is the drive for capitalism to make more profits by driving down wages. They let immigrants slip in to work at substandard wages and substandard conditions until it's politically feasible to deny them entry as a means of gaining political power. So when we talk about immigration in the United States, we cannot discard racism and we cannot discard the capitalist drive for profits.
Okay. Next up is no border walls. I agree with that. While both corporate parties focus on border security and enforcement, the Green Party calls for the dismantling of the US-Mexico border wall and for the cancellation of the wall's expansion. Not only is the wall an environmental disaster affecting surrounding families, wildlife, and the Rio Grande ecosystem, but it's also a monument to racist, anti-immigrant attitudes towards people fleeing economic and other injustices. We oppose the militarization of our borders, the misuse of the National Guard as border police, and the expansion of the wall between the US and Mexico. These escalations of violence will further intensify the human rights disaster our immigration policy has become, as well as seriously harm border ecosystems. We demand an immediate end to policies designed to force undocumented border crossers into areas where conditions dramatically increase the risk of permanent injury or death. We oppose the walling off of both traditional urban crossing areas of wilderness areas. We mourn the death of the thousands of men, women, and children who have died trying to cross this border.
Well, I think the platform position sort of speaks for itself. It's a little bit hubristic of the United States to talk about walling off its borders after the 1848 wars with Mexico and the various treaties signed at gunpoint with the Mexican government to cede large amounts of their land in the United States. I mean, we literally took the land from them by force, and now we're building a wall to presumably to protect it. The wall is a psychological symbol of the need for security of a certain part of the population, but there is no border in the world anywhere today, especially post-colonialism, that was not drawn to some extent by forces outside of those nations, and the resulting borders do not have themselves created conflicts within the nations by separating tribes, by creating environmental problems, by creating political conditions in those countries that are very difficult for them to deal with. So I don't think the United States has any moral high ground to talk about borders. It's simply the use of force, pure and simple, to direct things in a way they wish to go. The other part of that, of course, is that what do borders stop? They stop people. They don't stop money. Money flows freely across these borders. Capital flows freely across them, but labor cannot. And this means that controlling your borders is very much about controlling labor and the cost of labor.
Michael, you want to add to that?
Well, I think if you read.
You need to turn your volume up, Michael. Can't hear you.
I'm still with a volume issue.
Yeah, you got it now.
Yeah, I think that with your reading of it, as I said, it is very thorough and Wayne's comprehensive explanation. Really, not much I can add to that. I will say some politicians do use that as a rallying cry, raise a lot of money to build, as they say, a wall, and then they. I actually think that some of those politicians use it as a diversion tactic. I do remember in President Trump's first campaign or first presidency, him saying he was going to build that wall, and he was saying, look at the wall, what's going on over there. This is where all the bad people are coming from. And he was changing the tax codes, and making him and his friends even richer. And so it was almost like, a game of look over there, there's the bad people. And they were doing things that people were not paying attention to enrich themselves. So basically using, the brown people coming across the board as a boogeyman, and using it just as a tool to, make people fearful and, a hot button topic, and basically a diversion for what they really wanted to do. Over.
Fair enough. Next up, no family separation. We strongly condemn separating families at the border. The forcible removal of children from their parents at our borders and their detention in substandard conditions are acts of government-sanctioned child abuse and neglect. We further demand that money used to support ICE be diverted to repairing the psychological damage to separated families, and that these families be financially compensated as victims of kidnapping and extortion.
Well, that part of the platform would have been added in 2017, 2018, I think, at the time that the first Trump administration was actually using family separation publicly as an example of their dedication to removing immigrants to their base, to the GOP, the Trump base. It was horrific, and it just goes without saying that you don't do stuff like this. It's reminiscent of the treatment of slaves in the South and in pre-Civil War. Where people would breed slaves to sell, and they would break up families, children, parents, relatives. They would just, you're a piece of property, you can be sold. And as far as the border is concerned, they're saying, well, you're an object that I can manage, and I will manage you by keeping you on this side of this wall. And if I let you in, it's only because I have an economic use for you. So the Trump and the Republicans are acting out possibly some deep psychological urge to return to 1830 and have the same amount of control they had then.
All right. Next up is amnesty and civil rights. While Democratic and Republican lawmakers prioritize immigration enforcement, NC Greens support amnesty for undocumented immigrants and legal status that allows a path to residency and citizenship. The NC Green Party calls for racial and economic justice for documented and undocumented immigrants and migrants, as well as the right to obtain border passes, work permits, and driver's licenses. Non-citizens should be extended the same civil and human rights and protections claimed by U.S. citizens. All persons fleeing political, racial, economic, religious, and other types of persecution must be welcomed to the U.S. and given the opportunity for permanent resident status. The U.S.'s history of arbitrary denial of political asylum claims must end. Particular attention should be given to political exiles, refugees, and those whose lives would be at risk if asylum were not granted. Granting of asylum should be automatic if the asylum seekers are fleeing from a danger created by U.S. interference and manipulation of the political process in the country of origin. Family reunification must be a priority in accepting applications for permanent residency, and reunification must be swift. The years of waiting that families currently endure must stop. The U.S. must cease placing for adopting immigrant children prior to making all possible attempts at reunification with the child's family. Permanent residency should not be denied based on political views, racial or national origin, religious beliefs, sexual preference, disability, or any other arbitrary basis. The U.S. government must, in particular, stop demonizing applicants from countries where Islam is the primary religion.
Well, James, I think again, that's comprehensive, and it's self-explanatory. We see what's going on now with a lot of Islamophobia. Countries, Muslim countries are treated differently, and I know that many people in the government would deny that, but it's obvious. The facts are there, the data is there, and so I don't it still boils down to, James, that I mean, how are you treating people? Are you making them less than, which allows them to be treated a certain way? I mean, I agree. I actually think, and I said this years ago, Wayne, when that MAGA movement started, I said, well, he wants to go back to the 1830s, where they would treat the way that the indigenous people in this country were treated during that time period, and I feel like a lot of people, they think that's okay, and I think that's why the Green Party has this in their platform. Now, James, I will say I have about 12 more minutes, so are you still want to stay on immigration? Because I know we have quite a ways to go.
Well, for the immigration civil rights thing, there's actually one more thing, but we can actually go on till like around 8:40. So yeah.
I mean, it's your show. I did say I was available for an hour.
That's fine. Let's go to this last one on immigration. All right. Institutionalized language rights and diversity. Greens oppose English-only legislation. Immigrants already have ample incentive to learn English, but non-English speaking people are put at risk of exploitation when interacting with English-only government agencies. Greens call for institutionalization of adequate and accessible English language instruction and assistance, including federal funding for communities to provide ESL, English as a Second Language, training, as well as certified translators for courts, social service agencies, and all government agencies dealing with the public. Additionally, the language rights of indigenous people who lived in this land before it became part of the U.S. must be recognized and respected.
Well, I think that section of the platform and the section before it really, the subtext of all of this is that U.S. foreign policy has acted in ways that create the problems that the platform tries to address. And so the platforms are really responses to U.S. action and U.S. foreign policy. The people that complain about immigrants not speaking English 4 generations ago, their grandparents spoke German. Or French or Estonian or any one of a number of languages. The people in the Southern Delta spoke Creole, which is the language of Haiti. And the U.S. has a long history of meddling in foreign affairs of Haiti. In fact, the domestic affairs of Haiti. Again, largely out of fear of Black people, out of racism. So all of these demands, all of the things that the platform argues against are really pushing back against racism in the United States. And that racism is underpinned by capitalism. So when we address all these things, we're addressing these little symptoms of the expressions of capitalist racism. So when it's easy to read the platform and say, well, we have this item, we have that item, and we're addressing this item, we're addressing that item. Anyone can read the language and see that it is taking a stance on a moral issue. But the deeper problem is the institutional racism that's built into the United States that drives it, and capitalism's use of that institutional racism to suppress wages and keep control of labor. So when you look at a platform, you have to dig underneath the symptoms that were being addressed when it was written and see what the causes of them are. And racism and capitalism underlie almost every part of the platform that we have to address. It underlies the environmental issues. It underlies the economic issues, the education issues. Almost anything you look at, you will find can be traced back at its root to exploitative capitalism and the racism that accompanies it. So when you look at the Green Party platform as a whole, it's important to remember that our capitalist economic system is the root of these problems. the racism and discrimination against others built into the history of this country from the 1600s on is at the root of these problems. The tendency of capitalism to expand and grow at the expense of others is at the root of these problems. Everything in that platform, if you dig down into it, you really have to get at those as the base causes.
Fair enough, and that's it for immigration. And I'll try not to go into the other long stances from here on out, just so that way we can go through even more of your platform. So next up is trade policy. Any economic engagement by the state of North Carolina with other countries must be predicated on vigorous human rights and environmental standards, including women's rights, racial and minority rights, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender rights, children's rights, and workers' rights.
Michael, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I think that that's still just, again, as Wayne explained, with the platform, once you dig into that, then that does tie into economics and our trade partners. We don't want to enrich countries who are misusing other people, exploiting other people, and so we don't want to, we don't want to make money off them either, because we would be taking part in that exploitation of other people, since we support women's rights and we support rights of people who historically have been marginalized. Then we would not want to become partners with anyone who is participating in those kind of activities. So those that are exploiting workers. So we support workers' rights. We believe in livable wages. So we would not want to partner with another country that is exploiting the workers.
Understandable. All right, next thing I want to go over is community greenlands. We support the creation of multiple use community forests on marginal farmland with the purposes of capturing carbon, protecting soils, moderating water runoff, producing fuel and food, providing recreation, cleaning the air, sheltering human communities, and protecting wildlife habitat.
Well, this goes to issues of urban planning and also eco-socialist planning. It's focused on cities, urban areas, because a lot of people live in urban areas. And what we see, what anybody sees that bothers to look, is that we have rampant development driven entirely by profit that pays lip service to green areas and walkways and pedestrian traffic. But if you look closely at it, those facilities are largely available in affluent areas. They're not available to people in areas that are being gentrified, traditional historical communities. Development in those communities tends to focus on buying out property and converting it into luxury housing. The urban planning is going to be very important in the future because we are going to find that as the climate crisis continues to shift onto us, it continues to impose the burdens of extraneous heat and an accelerated hydrologic cycle on us, along with extreme weather, that we are in danger of having our food supply chains interrupted. And regions are going to have to start developing to get more local food supply and stop relying on this top-down model that's imposed on us by producers and distributors. By distributors, I mean people that buy food wholesale and then sell it to grocery stores, who then pass it on to us, each one extracting money along the way and adding to the carbon footprint of those activities. The other issue, of course, is that decent urban planning reduces the need for additional traffic. There's an enormous antipathy in this country to mass transit. North Carolina is an example of that. The legislature considers mass transit somehow to be a personal offense. I've never quite understood that, but that's what they treat it as. The reality is that mass transit is considered to be for poor people, and they don't want to. Have no interest in funding something that might help people that are lesser placed economically themselves. But this kind of planning is going to be a necessity in the not too distant future. In fact, it's a necessity right now. We're wasting time not implementing some of these things. Now, that particular platform thing could probably be a little bit better written. For example, we said marginal farmland. Well, marginal farmland is disappearing along with productive farmland, where we're seeing it go away day by day. We're reducing by hundreds of acres our ability to feed our population, relying on industrialized agriculture with its heavy input of chemicals, pesticides, and so forth to produce food at a profit. That is then passed on to other people, and the assumption is that somehow this model will keep us alive. There's absolutely no guarantee in the face of climate change that that's true. We have to begin looking at all of human production, agriculture, transportation, housing, clothing, from an ecological standpoint. If we don't do that, then talking about urban planning or anything else doesn't matter.
Fair enough. Next up is actually one that I've been actually interested in talking about, which is the plant-based diet. No other party has this, so I'm going to read that right now. A plant-based diet contributes to personal health as well as to the health of the planet. We believe that by lessening the nation's reliance on animal products, more food would be available for the millions of people suffering from chronic hunger. We vigorously support abandoning our present reliance on animal agriculture in this country in favor of a more sustainable system. 1. Nutritional information in public schools should not be written by the meat and dairy industries. Educational materials should come from sources without financial conflicts of interest. 2. Schools should provide accurate information on plant-based diets in nutrition classes at all levels.
Michael, do you want to address that?
Well, I think that again, having the large meat industry involved with decisions about what's good for children is a problem, because it just boils down to what Wayne has been talking about. They just think about their profits, not what's sustainable. And we know that these large CFOs, they're problems for the environment, the amount of gases they produce, that helps drive the global warming, and I mean it's just not so it's not good for the environment. And we know that this over reliance on meat, and I do know it's protein, but there are other ways of getting protein. It's not healthy. It hasn't been healthy in our society for a long, long time. And so it boils down to it's better for individuals' health. It's better for the environment, and it's better for a more sustainable economy. And so that's definitely something that we support. So I mean, the studies have shown that our bodies are more healthy with less reliance on meat, and that as I said, the gases from these CFOs around, not just in the United States, where we know there's some states where there are actually more cattle than people, and also the treatment of the animals. It's disgusting, and if anyone is it just bothers me because if you're seeing how those animals are treated, um, it will tear at your heart. And so I mean, it's just all around um, just bad news.
Yeah.
Over.
So I guess before we go on to this next play, what is your favorite plant-based meal?
Favorite plant-based meal?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, um, there are so many things that are good that it's difficult to pick one out. Uh, I do rely on some extent to protein from some of these companies that produce plant-based meat equivalents like Gardein and so forth. But it's not very hard at all to find perfectly good vegetarian meals that are and anyone would eat, would not even notice meat was there by virtue of, the legume protein from legumes, iron and vitamins from salads. It's not hard at all to find those things. The plant-based diet is also acknowledges veganism. I mean, there's much argument in the country about nutrition from vegan meals versus vegetarian meals, which use dairy and egg, versus meals centered around protein like beef or chicken or pork. But what is not arguable is the damage that the concentrated animal cultivation industry does in this country. The environmental damage that it does, the moral issue of the suffering of the animals involved, all of these things easily outweigh, the desire for profit. The people that want to eat meat, I know a lot of people that eat meat. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. They have to struggle with their own issues. But from a planetary point of view, from a point of view of eco-socialist planning, from a point of view of the future, we will not be able to support the sort of animal agriculture that we now rely on in the United States. It's not going to be supportable.
Michael?
Well, I mean, are you asking me about a meal? Because I think I've already addressed this topic.
Oh, did you ask? Oh, did you already answer that? Oh.
Well, I think he asked for your favorite vegetarian meal or vegetable meal, Michael.
Oh, I guess for me, just like some type of pasta and sauce. I'm a pasta guy, so I eat pasta and sauce.
All right, fair enough. Okay, next up, overconsumption. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Let me pull it up. The overuse of resources in the world's industrialized northern countries, particularly in North America, must be curbed. These countries use much more than the world's non-renewable resources, consume far more energy, and thus produce far more waste than developing countries. We must reclaim the virtue of frugality on our way to eliminating overconsumption and its attendant waste.
Well, I mean that's a direct consequence of capitalism. We overconsume because we overproduce. The global North, the West in general, through centuries of colonialism, has become used to extracting raw materials and resources from the global South and from Asia, and it's used that to create enormous wealth in these countries And largely it did that through overproduction, through making objects, commodities, if you will, whether it's food, housing, clothing, whatever. Nowadays, electronics, falls into that mix. But we have, 300 years of history of this, and at least 250 years or so of Marxist pure commodity production, where we create the appearance of wealth for those that can afford it, but it's accompanied by austerity and scarcity in the countries that we extract materials from. And increasingly today, that's accompanied by austerity and scarcity for people at the bottom of the economic ladder in the developed countries. And that's especially true in the United States. We overproduce and we overconsume, but we have 43 million people living in poverty in the United States, supposedly the richest country in the world. This overproduction, and that's partly a consequence of overproduction and of producing things that we just don't really need. How many plastic toy army soldiers do we need? How many Barbie dolls do we need? How much plastic do we produce and consume in the course of packaging materials that we now see is destroying our environment and our biome, our bodies? This is all overconsumption, overproduction, which is tailored to a society that overconsumes. We cannot continue down that path. It's simply not possible.
Right, that is pretty fair. Next up is combustion engines. As much as possible, government should work to reduce internal combustion vehicular traffic, especially in cities. Ultimately, we support reorganizing our living patterns into a self-reliant, human-scaled society.
Do you want to talk about that, Michael?
Well, I would say, yeah, and I would say this because I did say, James, I was available for about an hour. What was about combustible engines?
Let me reread the stance. As much as possible, government should work to reduce internal combustion vehicular traffic, especially in cities. Ultimately, we support reorganizing our living patterns into a self-reliant, human-scaled society.
Yeah, I think that ties into what Wayne was talking about earlier about the urban planning. I mean, because obviously the fewer cars that you have out and trucks, sending up those chemicals up, and endangering our environment. The more that they're out there, the more danger there is, and so with planning and the transportation, mass transportation that Wayne was talking about, which our government seems to be against. I think that's key for sustainable ecological planning, and so that is something that the Green Party definitely advocates for.
All right. To speed this up, we're gonna finish reading the platform for now. And I gotta ask, how is the North Carolina Green Party doing? What you guys doing right now?
Well, we're planning for the 2026 elections. Mostly, we have a statewide meeting coming up in February where we'll be addressing some business. Our focus now is, doing the best we can in the 2026 elections. Obviously, we want to increase our membership. The North Carolina Green Party does not define membership the way the Democratic and Republican and other parties do. They count their membership as people that are registered to vote under their banner. We count our membership as people that pay dues to the party and participate in the creation of its policy and its execution. And we need many, many more of those members. We're organized along the lines of a union, and just like a union, the more people we have, the stronger we are. So one of our goals, of course, will be to increase our own membership. The people of the United States simply aren't used to a political party that operates that way. It's been a long time. It's been since the late 1800s that we had any political parties that could be said to operate along those lines. where people became members of the parties. So we need to distribute that idea further to convince people that we need that it is worth their while to invest in a party that offers sensible and sound scientific challenges to the policies of the other parties. Right now, nothing the other parties do makes any sense whatsoever anymore, except in terms of the preservation of capitalist profit. And we can't continue that. We have to change our basic economic system.
Right. Well, James, I appreciate your time. I look forward to another invitation from you, and coming back on at a future date. As I said, I committed to an hour, and I'm going to need to, log off now. So, Wayne, I look forward to talking to you again. And thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Michael.
Take care, Michael.
All right, let's finish this off. Does your state party plan on uploading any more videos to your YouTube channel?
Does our state party plan on uploading what to our YouTube channel?
Uploading more videos to your YouTube channel.
Well, ideally we would. We have kind of a gap in the administration of our social media and so forth right now. It takes people that have time and dedication to do that, and we don't have anyone that's fulfilling that particular role at the moment. Obviously, that's a technical challenge that can be met by any of us, and I guess we need to organize ourselves a little bit differently to see if we can take more advantage of social media in that regard. What we really need is a team of people doing this. It's one of the issues we're going to discuss in February at our meeting.
All right, fair enough. Man, I really wish I could be agreeing. I wish I could be agreeing so that I can help you with your YouTube stuff, but it's fine. But last thing, is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything I missed?
Well, I mean, nothing that you've missed. The platform, represents what our vision of what we think, based on our best knowledge of what needs to be done to solve many of the problems that are facing us. The Green Party as a whole, the North Carolina Green Party, is an eco-socialist party. It's anti-capitalist. And so obviously all of these issues that are in the platform have their root in economic exploitation under capitalism. And capitalism itself is simply becoming the source of our problems. It's becoming the source of our environmental disasters. It has wealth inequality, why we have enormous gaps between the poor and the rich, why the people that are in the middle economic rungs of the ladder are stressed, can't afford to pay their bills, go bankrupt, especially medical bankruptcy. All of these things trace back to our economic system. And our economic system has to be a primary focus of change in the United States going forward. If we could reduce wealth inequality through legislation and taxes and so forth, that would be a first step, but it's not the ultimate solution to what we're doing. We have to have large numbers of people coming together under the banner of this party or some party that will address these issues in a clear-eyed manner and not be taken in by the economic propaganda that is foisted upon us.
All right. With that being said, that's going to be it for this episode of the Political Freedom Fighters podcast. If you all have enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button down below. Feel free to type in a comment if you have enjoyed. definitely hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel and hit the notification bell so that way you can all be notified on any new updates to the podcast episodes. And of course, as always, I will be linking all the social media of the North Carolina Green Party in the description below, like I've done with all the other parties, so that you can all check it out for yourselves. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoy, and I'll see you all later.